All right. We are here. The Questionable Podcast is live on a Tuesday. First Tuesday, I think, ever. But we have a very
a year.
It's been a long time. That's true.
Since we've done this on Tuesdays. For people, the people that don't know, we actually used to record on Tuesdays and then publish on like a Wednesday. So it's been
we've come a long.
We've done a Tuesday night.
We've come a long way since downtown Detroit.
Yeah,
we were
in
down
your basement. Well, you're still in your basement, but I'm not in your basement anymore.
Well, anyways, welcome in everybody. You got the Questionable Podcast. You got Scotty Questions here with Meko. What's up, Meko?
It's good, man.
Oh man, it's a big night tonight, and our special guest, the journalism himself, Jeremy Reisman. Thank you for being here, sir.
Oh, no problem. It's been too long, honestly. I like hanging out with you guys. We hang out in each other's chat every now and then, but it's good to talk to you guys face to face.
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually been like a full year and a month since Jeremy was actually originally on our podcast for the first time. I think you were our first guest, if not our first guest, our second guest that we've ever had on the podcast. So it's kind of cool for a year later coming full circle.
Yeah, and I feel like we're all in a better place right now too. It's great.
I mean, each of us are in a better place. The Lions are in a better place.
Exactly.
It's a much different conversation, I think, this time around, with everything that's been going on with the Lions. But Scotty, I don't know. I'm ready to dive in. I don't want to hold Jeremy too long.
No, but again, thank you, Jeremy, for being here. We're joined by the real journalism himself, Detroit Lions beat writer and producer of Pride of Detroit. So thank you again for being here. You guys had a great show yesterday. Thank you for rating us. It gives me a heart attack every time you do it, still.
That's the best part.
It's not the best part, dude. I'm like, yeah, Meko, so okay. Okay.
It's funny to me because Scott gets so distracted and I can see he's just looking at the follows and everything that's happening on Twitch. And so a little behind the scenes, Scott's usually the one that's plugged into Twitch. I'm usually plugged into YouTube, which shout out to our YouTube audience. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Scotty, do you have anybody from Twitch?
Yeah, we got a couple people. Joshua Mercer, Thomas Hutchins, Stan Pask, Big DMG1. Nice. Yeah. Thank y'all for being there on Twitch.
On Twitch as well. So shout out to everybody that's joining us tonight on the stream. Like I said, don't want to hold everybody too long. We did stream last night, both of us. So I'm sure we would all like to get back to our evenings and kind of somewhat of a normal schedule. I know, Jeremy, you're also probably gonna be streaming tomorrow as well, because you guys.
Yeah, we got a lot of content. We got a full week ahead of us. But it's good because there's really a month of pretty much nothing ahead, where we're all just going to be talking about the draft and get exhausted at talking about certain topics of the draft. So I'm cool with going hard for this week and then maybe coasting for a couple weeks here and getting ready for the draft.
Well, that works for us. I think we have some good questions for you this evening. Nothing too crazy, but we want to dig in. We do. And Meko, I'm going to let you kick us off, man, per usual.
Well, yeah, I think, we got to start just overall. So, Jeremy, how would you describe your reaction to, all the free agency moves that Brad Holmes and the Lions have made this offseason? Let's just start at the top. First impression or just your biggest takeaways from Brad Holmes and the moves that he's made so far?
I think the first word, and it's gonna sound bad, I think the first word that comes to mind is relief. Because I don't doubt Brad Holmes at this point. He's done enough goodwill to pretty much trust him, at least on the surface. I'm not going to just blindly accept everything that he does. But when he went into the NFL Combine and him and Dan Campbell were both like, yeah, we're not going for top tier talent. We're not going to sign a guy that's getting the biggest money in free agency. That's not what we're about. We're about, just getting guys that can help us win and maybe start. When they said that, I'm like, you can get by on that for a while. And they have gotten by on that for a while.
Right.
But at some point, you're going to have to take a swing or two to get some top tier talent in here, because you can't just do it through the draft. At some point, the draft picks are going to dry up a little bit. You're not going to hit on every draft pick. You're not going to have 2 first-round picks every year.
Right.
So at some point, you're going to have to pick and choose and get your hands a little dirty here, because you can only get so far, I think, on your draft. I really do think that. It's where your foundation is, and it's how you maintain long-term success. But if you want to get like a championship level team, you got to take some big swings in free agency. And I was under the impression they weren't going to do that after they had talked. Now, I think you can look back on those words and be like, you know, they actually weren't lying, because even the Cameron Sutton signing, big money, but not top tier, not like record breaking cornerback money. Like you think back to some of the other times the Lions have made free agent splashes. Like you look at the Trey Flowers deal, that was
right,
monumental at the time. You look at Justin Coleman, he was the highest paid nickel at the time. That's not what this signing was, but it was a significant signing, and more than maybe I gave the Lions credit for being able to pull off. So it was a relief to me, because I wanted them to make a swing or two, and they made a swing or two or three. And of course they did exactly what I think everyone in Detroit was hoping, which was hit the cornerback position as hard as possible. Whereas now you're going into the draft and you don't have to take a guy at 6 if he's not your guy.
No, and I think that's like, you hit on something that was basically like leading into my next question, which is, like you're saying, like the first 2 years of Brad Holmes and their approach to free agency was very lackluster. I think to a lot of fans, especially last year. I remember when we brought you on, that was one of the questions we had, was just like, hey, they're not doing anything. And I think we had got like a couple days into free agency, like, why aren't they signing anyone? That wasn't the case this year. Brad Holmes has been very aggressive in his approach to free agency. Like you said, signing Cam Sutton, not to a monumental deal, but again, like making that I think that was like, you know, tampering opened on Monday. We knew that Cam Sutton was being re-signed, or was being signed. We knew Isaiah Buggs was being re-signed. We knew Alex Anzalone was being re-signed. The Lions hit free agency pretty aggressively. Why do you think that he took that approach this year in comparison to previous years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it was probably a couple of factors. First is just resources, right? They were just in a much better situation in terms of cap space, not only in terms of how much they went into free agency, but we've seen that they've been very flexible with some of the deals that they have on the books, some of the deals that they set up and were able to adjust. And shout out to Romeo Okwara for being the biggest team player I've ever seen in my life by taking a $9 million salary hit.
I mean, wow.
The Lions just didn't have the cap room to make a lot of splash moves in the previous years, and they also didn't really have the wiggle room in a lot of these contracts to create extra cap space. But at the same time, I think this is also a statement of where they think this team is, and I'm sure you guys have seen it all over Twitter, all over ESPN, NFL Network. Like, there are people that believe in this team not just making the playoffs, not just winning the NFC North next year, which they're both favorites to do.
Right.
Like, I don't make me say it. Like,
there's no, like, people are talking like they can challenge for the NFC, like not only win the NFC North, make the playoffs, but win the NFC and thus make it into the into the Super Bowl.
And say it, Super Bowl, guys.
Like making it into the. I don't know if I've heard anyone say yet that they can win it, but like people are like, they can make it. They can make a serious run at it, and
it does feel like there's a window open here, right? And
it does.
Listen, Brad Holmes's vision has always been keep the window open, not like strike while the window's open, so that like you take your shot and then you're back to square one. Like, you got to keep it open, and I think with the Lions, their young roster, they're 4 draft picks in the first 2 rounds. They're going to be able to do that, but they also recognize that, hey, listen, like, Aaron Rodgers is gone. We're the favorites to win the division. There's not a lot of good quarterbacks in this entire conference right now. Jared Goff is still playing pretty well, and we've got a young core that played like a top 5 team towards the end of the season. Like, let's go for it and see what happens. And I think you always get a little weary when your team wins in March. You don't want your team to win in March, because those aren't the teams that win in January and February. But when I actually don't see a lot of Lions listed as winners in free agency, because they aren't winning it in the typical way, right? They're not doing the Chicago Bears where you're throwing money at everybody and everybody and everybody. They're being very selective. They've only added 4 or 5 guys. 3 or 4 of them have been on 1-year deals, so they're not mortgaging their future either. So they're in the present. They're making aggressive moves for the present day, but none of this is going to hurt them down the line either. And so they're playing this perfectly down the middle. And I think it's smart. I think it's really freaking exciting as a Lions fan. And And man, I want it to be September already.
Responsible window breakage is what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, really. I mean, they're not like destroying, like shattering the window by like getting a Lamar. And I said that, but we're not going there. But that,
Oh,
but
we're
that,
gonna get there.
I
We're
know.
gonna get there in this podcast. We are absolutely.
You
gonna
know,
get to that
like,
topic in this
I mean,
podcast.
that's shattering a window, you know, but anyways, sorry, I digress. Meko, go ahead.
No, but I think like going back to your previous point, Jeremy, about like previous regimes like having to overspend, I think there was always this belief amongst the fan base that like, well, you have to pay that premium to convince people to come to Detroit. You don't have the wins, you don't have the window, so you have to pay whatever free agents are demanding just to be able to get what was perceived to be top tier talent. And I don't know, obviously, like we look back at Justin Coleman and Trey Flowers in a very negative light because they didn't live up to the contracts. But that was the Lions making those attempts. And I think kind of what we're seeing now is that like, well, you have the pedigree, you have, 2 years where, I mean, one of those years where, yes, it was a clear rebuild, but you won a lot of people over by just fighting, right? DJ Chark comes to this team because he's like, hey, I was on a team that was also losing games. It didn't look like this.
Mm-hmm.
And then you follow that up with, yes, a slow start, but then to win 8 out of your last 10, that kind of put the rest of the league on notice where, again, like you said, national media was going in there and was like, hey, if the Lions had made it in, that wasn't a team that anyone wanted to see. And I think that's starting to like, trickle down and matriculate throughout the rest of the league that like, hey, the Lions, there's something real in Detroit these days. And you might want to get there while the getting's good.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, right? For anybody in the NFL to see what Aiden was able to do, and then Houston, right? And but like that, those guys like Aiden, there was tons of question marks with Aiden, right? Like high motor, but can he do it? Yeah. Right? James Houston was like, who? And
6th round pick, yeah,
right. And they come in and they're that solid, right? Especially toward the end of the season, right? When Aaron Glenn had everybody kind of on the same page, and maybe I got to give Anzalone a little more credit as he's the quarterback kind of, or was, when Tracy Walker comes back, he might, kind of take that a little bit too. And those guys in the secondary might, I don't know how that's going to work out, but it's just very interesting to see, right? Like how they make it work. They make it look easy. They make it look fun, right? I don't want to go to work and have a shitty time. I want to go to work and have a blast. And I think a lot of these guys saw it. And I think that is why you get, some of these signings, right? Like Gardner, right? Like
Gardner Johnson feels like a signing that this team would have never been able to make in the past.
Correct. That to me, of all of these,
not for $8 million at all. Like
right.
Not 1 year, $8 million. No.
But from all of our signings, that's the one to me is like, oh, we got him because of who the team is, right? What they've done. That was the one to me that felt like, wow, okay, so we can do it.
Well, I think even Graham kind of speaks to that. Sure. He actually said that specifically, like in his presser, right? Like I wanted to play with my friends. And I wanted to play in a place that I've heard good things. So
he's coming back home a little bit, right? Not really home, but you know what I mean.
Sort of home.
He's kind of home.
His football home for the past whatever. But I think another thing that plays into that, and obviously with Gardner Johnson, you have the Aaron Glenn factor there helping you out quite a bit, I would imagine.
Yeah, I saw that hug on social media. Right. It's the biggest embrace.
Yeah. But I think another thing too is like you have to give the Lions credit because it's almost it feels like a reclamation of your career factory in a way because they've taken on a couple of these projects and churned them out on the other side and John Kaminsky is one, Charles Harris is one, DJ Chark is kind of one. You're signing all these guys to 1-year deals and it hasn't worked out 100% of the time, but a lot of these times these guys come out better on the other end, and whether that means signing a big deal somewhere else or coming back and getting re-signed here. These players are revitalizing their careers in Detroit. And I have to imagine other teams are taking notice. Other teams that are like, no one's taking it. I mean, Emmanuel Mosley is a perfect example, right? Like, coming off a torn ACL, you're probably not going to get a big deal. But if you land in Detroit, a team that has taken injured players, a team that has taken guys that aren't coming off their best year and turned them around and given them an opportunity to compete and springboard their careers, come to Detroit. We'll do it.
We're the NFL career rehab facility in Allen
That's
Park.
right.
I mean, I called this out last year. Well, remember, we were talking about this last year.
No, and it definitely feels like that. And I think that kind of leads into the next question I kind of have for you, Jeremy, is when we look at this team, and we look at the message that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have been kind of in lock and step with, it's that culture and players earning a spot on this team have always and being productive. You will earn a spot by doing that, right? By being a culture fit, by being productive on the field. That's what's going to earn you a spot on this team. And they've been saying that since day one. But then we kind of see them somewhat, it looks like a pivot from that when they don't re-sign Jamal Williams, who has his best career or best year in his career, sets a record for most rushing touchdowns in a year, has 1,000 rushing yards, and they don't re-sign him. I know initially, I think it's probably died down a bit, but I know initially when that happened, there were a lot of people that I saw on Twitter and other spaces. I think even John and I kind of got into it a little bit back and forth about, does this damage that message of hey, if you play well, you will have a spot here?
That's another really, really good question, because it crossed my mind, and I think I even published something on Pride of Detroit, at least suggesting that might be what's going on here. Obviously, you have to look at the big picture here too, because they re-sign Isaiah Buggs, they re-sign John Kaminsky, they re-sign CJ Moore. They bring back a lot of guys from last year's team too, which I think we all thought they were going to do. But Jamal Williams is obviously kind of everyone's referred to him as the heart and soul of the team. He's a guy that had 1,000 yards. He's a guy that broke Barry Sanders' touchdown record last year.
Right.
How could you not bring that guy back? And yeah, maybe there's going to be some concern in the locker room. Maybe there's going to be some upset people in the locker room, but I think you also have to give NFL players credit. They understand this is a business. They understand that nothing is guaranteed in this league. You're constantly kind of having to prove it. I look at John Kaminsky too, man, a guy who proved it all last season. And then he took a deal that is extremely backloaded and said listen, I'm just going to bet on myself again because I want to be here. Jamal wasn't willing to do that. It sounds like, he has Drew Rosenhaus as his agent. So they were pushing for some big money from what I understand. The Lions definitely wanted him back. And it's of my personal belief that they would have been, they would have offered and maybe did offer what the Saints got him for. But I think Jamal's eyes got a little big. He thought maybe the Lions loved him a little bit more than they did.
Yeah.
And, Brad drew a line, and you have to kind of respect that in a way, because they did love Jamal. Jamal was a perfect fit for what they did. I think David Montgomery is a better running back than Jamal Williams, but I don't know if David Montgomery is going to have the kind of year that Jamal just did. That was a special year.
Right.
And I'm sure they wanted to award that. I'm sure they did, but as a businessman, there has to be a line, right? There has to be, we're not going to pay you $6, $7, $8 million. We're just not going to do that. That's you're 28. You probably apexed in your career at this point.
Right.
At some point, it's not just about paying you for what you did, but paying you for what we think you're going to do. And at $6, $7, $8 million, that's probably beyond what you're probably going to play in the future.
He hit some incentives too, didn't he? At the end of the season, right?
I think he did. Yeah.
So which he earned, right? And
yeah.
That's totally fair, right? So they had the incentives there for him to earn it. And I think he also, who's his agent? Did we just have Rosenhaus?
Drew Rosenhaus.
Yeah. I mean, he's just so aggressive. I in my gut, if I had to, right, from everything I've heard, right, to what you guys said yesterday, somewhere in the middle of this, was what happened.
Right.
But I really do think, the way in which Jamal was out talking, interviews, right, on Good Morning Football, he was on First Take, he was everywhere. He was feeling himself. He was. And he's feeling the team, though. And he, he thought it was a payday. And I think it's responsible, and you have to appreciate that from Holmes, because we can't get, we just can't do that right now, right? That's, we need the whole team to keep growing and moving, and we don't want to be held hostage by one guy. Not that we're being held hostage, but, a lot of money to, we don't pay running backs.
Well, we
do.
We just
we did.
We did. We did.
We did. But I think that's also, you have to think about, that's also out of our forced hand, because he, whatever he wanted. I mean, maybe he wanted like 10, 12, who knows? But if he wanted that much, and like Holmes is like, right, he didn't want to miss out. So he moved as fast as he could, contingency plan, which also you got to respect. He's got it all mapped out. And so, and I think Montgomery's going to have a big year, but I differ there. We can talk about him. I know. Some feedback
I think 17
yesterday.
touchdowns is hard. It's really tough. Like,
oh, for sure.
I think Jamal kind of hit the jackpot in that. And I think, again, that's where there's a little bit of context to what I do think like we sometimes get sucked into press conferences, right? And we get so overwhelmed, and just not overwhelmed, but like we get so won over by the like rah-rah speech of like, hey, this is what this team is going to be and this is how we're going to run it, that we forget that there's a certain level of context, which is the business aspect of it, where it's like, yes, if you play hard and if you produce, there is a spot for you here. However, that doesn't mean that we're giving out blank checks. We still have to negotiate. We still have to find the right value based on what the market says and based on how we're trying to build a team. And I think that's where we met the crossroads with Jamal. Like you guys have both said, like, clearly they loved him. We heard that from both sides, that there was mutual interest from both sides to keep him. But where things broke down was the business side of things. And I think if you start a pattern of just like, again, giving into players because they're great culture fits, and you don't take a bigger picture, like a bigger look at like their overall body of work, then it's like, well, then everybody, like, right, then that means Panay, when his deal's up, that he can basically be like, well, hey, I've been, just as big of a heartbeat for this offensive line and this and the other. I believe I absolutely should get top dollar, which I'm sure Panay probably will.
Right.
But like, it's just a little bit more, you put yourself in a really tough bind in those situations where you aren't able to like fluidly negotiate with your players. With that in mind, go ahead.
Well, the final point I kind of wanted to make is just that this whole thing had kind of been a concern of mine with Brad Holmes, is that he overvalues culture, right?
Oh, same.
He gets
really good point.
He gets these guys that like Levi's a great example, right? You ignore maybe some red flags because you love Levi the person, you love Levi the gritty football player, and you're willing to almost draft Levi in the first round, but eventually get him in the second round because you like him so much, and that's kind of been a pattern for a lot of what they've done, especially in the draft, a little bit in free agency as well. And so I was questioning whether this team would ever, maybe cut back on that, maybe be like, you know what, culture isn't as important. Let's just get a talented dude. And I'm not trying to say David Montgomery is not a culture fit. He absolutely is. He's a hard worker. He's a community member, all that sort of stuff.
Yes, sir, Ski.
Yes, sir, Ski. That's right. But it just shows.
Doesn't like.
I don't. I hate.
Sorry,
it.
Jeremy.
Jeremy, it's like.
Please finish. Please finish, and then we'll get into that. I'm sorry.
The overall point. No, that's fine. The overall point is just like, I'm glad that there's a line there. I'm glad, and I think it's also that maybe the entire the culture of the Detroit Lions isn't going to crumble because Jamal is gone. Right? They've got enough good natured guys in that business, in that locker room, where they're gonna be just fine. So maybe now they don't have to be perfect culture fits to fit this team. Maybe just go get a talented dude. Sean, I know maybe this is where the conversation is going, and I was
going to say your team is up like perfectly.
Let's do it. I'll let you tee it up from there.
Well, no, yeah, because speaking of culture, the Lions kind of took a gamble on culture when you look at Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who, again, like you're getting differing reports at this point, right? There are some people that are going out. I believe like last night there was an interview from that was Ron Harper and I want to say Steve Smith, where Ron Harper is essentially just like, hey, like the biggest concern with Chauncey is Chauncey, like his character and how he conducts himself. But then you have AJ Brown coming out and being like, hey, amazing teammate. We're going to miss him. Detroit got a good one. Like so much praise about the type of teammate he is. But with that said, with the Lions, let's just say they are taking a flyer on a culture fit. Does that give them a little more leeway when it comes down to like who they're able to pick in the draft? I mean, does it give them a little bit more leeway? Does it give you a little more faith that like, hey, they can take a shot on a Jalen Carter who has even bigger red flags surrounding his name? Yeah.
Jeremy just chuckles.
I'm going to give you a very Brad Holmes GM answer.
Of course you
it's
are.
going to be very unsatisfactory because, as everyone knows, I like to walk the line here. I think it's very much an individual case by case thing, right? Chauncey Gardner Johnson is a unique case because the Lions know exactly who he is. They've been with him in New Orleans. They know whether they can manage that personality or not. They know if he's a hard worker when he walks through the building versus when he walks out the building or when he walks onto the field on Sundays. So they know him. Drafting a guy is an entirely different guy, an entirely different thing, right? You have to know a guy through and through, but you only get to spend 15 minutes with him at the combine, a half a day with him in his top 30 visit. And you try to talk to as many people as you can around him, but some of them are going to lie and you have to kind of weed through all the BS there. So it's hard to know. I also think some of the character stuff with Gardner Johnson is being blown out of proportion now. I've even seen some Eagles fans kind of point to some Eagles right and be like, you're saying this guy's such a toxic guy. Why weren't you reporting this during the season? Like, why is he all of a sudden like this cancer? And I know like there, he got in a scrap in New Orleans in a practice with Michael Thomas, I think. And, he got cheap shotted by who was that? It was a Bears wideout or something. I don't remember.
Oh yeah. Wasn't that
snatched the chain off him and all that?
Yeah. It wasn't Darnell Mooney, right?
I don't think so. I don't remember who it was.
But
Talib?
It was a Bear.
Was it? No.
I don't know.
No, but it was a Bears receiver. Yeah, I do remember that.
But like either way, those are very visible things that maybe speak to some character concerns. But I actually found his presser to be one of the more fascinating ones because he's like, I'm all about personal growth right now. He's like, I know who I am as a football player. I can play safety. I can play nickel. I can play outside. I'm going to dominate there. What I like this stage of my career, it's all about personal growth. It's all about being a better teammate. It's all about being a better person. It's all about, being a better locker room presence, being a better friend. And that's really interesting. I don't think I've ever heard a player say something like that. Like, I like where my game's at. I'm going to be a better person this year. And I think having a mentor, I don't think there's any better word than mentor for Aaron Glenn in terms of his personal relationship. I think he even referred to it as like a father-son type of relationship. So I think that's going to help a lot. I don't think there's that much of I don't think the Lions have that much of a concern about character with CJ Gardner Johnson. So to take it back to your question in terms of what that means for the draft, not a lot.
Because like it, because you see people making that argument that like, well, hey, like you can take a Jalen Carter because you have such a strong culture presence, and I think I agree with that to a point, and I think you would as well. Like you agree with it to a point, but then it just becomes a matter of like, okay, but how deep do the character concerns run? Because if it's just and this is where we get into like a really tricky spot where like you might be belittling things, but like if Jalen Carter's worst attribute is like that, his worst character concern is that he has a lead foot and he needs to like really hone in on like, hey, drive the speed limit and like use common sense, like don't race people, which obviously I think after an event such as this, like that will drive that message home harder than anything else in his life.
Yeah.
Then like, okay, maybe that's the worst of it. But then you look at like a terrible combine performance and you kind of combine these two things where it's like, okay, so is he making immature decisions as well as like not a hard worker? And then it's like, that's a high draft pick. We're talking about possibly taking him at 6. It's a really high draft pick to put in someone where if you're not sure if they're going to work hard. And that's where like, you can't say like, oh no, our culture will like get that out of him because this isn't college. Like he gets to go home. He gets to like, he's going to have a lot of free time on his hands to do whatever he wants to do.
Yeah. It's Jalen Carter is an impossible situation to figure out from my armchair here, right? It's hard to know a person. It's hard to know how a person is going to react to trauma because let's be clear, like he went through trauma. And so I try to be an empathetic person and give him a little bit of leeway. Like the NFL Combine was supposed to be a triumph for this guy, right? It's supposed to be a huge weekend for him, and it's interrupted by, the arrest and all that sort of stuff. And that I would say is probably trauma, right? Like, you're going into the biggest interview for your life. It all gets disrupted. Everyone is smearing your name across every single publication out there. And then, a couple of weeks later, you have a chance to redeem yourself. And I don't know, you're probably going through a lot of emotions in that time. And I don't know if he wasn't keeping up with conditioning. I don't know. I mean, I didn't see it. Like, I saw some highlights of it. I don't feel like I can judge all of that based on a highlight and stuff. So you want to give the guy a little leeway, but you also have to think, well, listen, this job requires a tremendous amount of mental toughness.
Right.
And you don't want to feel callous towards a guy who's going through trauma, but at the same time, you're going to go through some crap in the NFL too. And you're going to have to weather that storm. And so if his poor pro day performance was a result of not being able to fight through it, again, it feels callous. It feels like you're pushing away a person's mental health aside, which is not what I'm doing. But it's also you're going to be tested. You're going to be tested mentally. You're going to be tested physically. And so this is tough. I want it all to work out, and I want Jalen Carter to be there for the Lions, and I want him to be a Detroit Lion. Yeah. But there's a lot of warning signs. And again, I don't want to pretend like I know anything about Jalen Carter based on these two unfortunate events. But it's going to require a lot of homework. And I hope the Lions do all their homework, because I do want to give a guy a chance in the midst of trauma. And I do want to give him an opportunity to prove himself and allow himself to grieve properly and come out on the other end, a better person.
Yeah, and just in keeping with this, right, there are guys that have overcome this type of, not exactly this situation.
This, right. Yeah, but yeah.
This is a little more extreme, but, I mean, still, there have been guys that have been able to overcome it, that have dropped, and, I mean, Tunsil's an example, just not the same way. I mean, wasn't Warren Sapp like that, too?
I was going to say, Warren Sapp, I think, had, some character issues coming out. I mean, again... Well, yeah, I don't even want to bring up certain people.
No, but
there are certain things that are not even excusable. But
right.
But yeah,
but I'm just saying they're
come into the league, yes, with huge red flags on their character, and have found ways to persevere and find ways to pave out very good careers for themselves, and not find themselves in trouble again.
Yeah, the one thing that I find interesting, and I've seen a couple of people bring it up, and I can't possibly know if it's true or not, but a lot of people think a culture like Detroit is actually a perfect fit for a guy like that, because their culture is so strong and they're all about work and grittiness. And that's the kind of people maybe he needs to surround himself with. And again, because I don't know who Carter is, I don't know what motivates Carter. I don't know what kind of people he surrounds himself with or what kind of people he vibes with. It's impossible for me to actually say whether that's true or not. But I guess I understand the logic of it, but I feel like it's jumping to conclusions a little bit.
Well, it's one of those things. I think John and I got into it where I was like, on the surface, that makes sense. Like, on the surface, I can see that. But then that's why teams do these interviews. That's why they have 30, these top 30 visits and things like that, because to take it to another sport, you can't afford to have yourself in a Ja Morant situation where you draft a guy that is uber talented and you're like, oh, he seems like he's got his head on his shoulders. And then 2 years into his career, you're dealing with some of the things that Ja had to deal with, where it's like, wait, when did you become this immature individual? This wasn't who we saw during the draft process. So it's very fluid. And I think, yes, on the surface, it's one of those things where it's like, I would love to have Jalen Carter, the player, here. I have to trust that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are doing an amazing job at vetting Jalen Carter, the person, before we can ever get to Jalen Carter, the player.
And before we move on, I do want to make a quick connection to the Gardner Johnson thing in regards to this and Holmes and Dan Campbell doing their homework. I mean, they must have done that with him. And the way I was thinking about it, if we recall Hard Knocks last year, when Jamal was getting in the face at the Colts practice, and Dan Campbell, you thought he wouldn't like it because he's like, don't fight. But he's like, I like that. We need that spark. And so if they can manage him right, I mean, if he's that type of shit stirrer that can make people mad, that's his job, right? Like, a big part of his job in the game is to do that. So it's interesting, and I agree with what both of you were saying about it. But yeah, like Aaron Glenn mentoring him and being able to like father-son relationship. I mean, and him wanting to work on himself. Obviously, that's probably addressing all the stuff that he knew would come out. But I think it is a good place for him, as we're talking, and potentially a good place for Carter, as long as we do our homework and know what motivates him, right? What pushes his buttons and what upsets him. And if we can get through that and they feel confident in the way in which they motivate the players that they can do it, then I would say yes. But again, this is something that is, we don't know, but it's interesting to speculate about. And man, it's tricky.
One more thing I would say about this too. I think another thing that does make the Lions a good fit. So if there were buckets of like, hey, these are reasons why you would, and these are reasons why you wouldn't. I think another thing that you could put in the bucket of why you would is that I can't think of a team off the top of my head. Maybe the Steelers might be a good example, but of a team that allows their players to be themselves, like that actually like is very much like, hey, look, we want you going in this direction as far as like team goals, team success, and even personal growth. But at the same time, like we're not trying to change you into a completely different person.
Right.
You look at this current Lions team and like Jared Goff is drastically different than Jameson Williams, who is also different from Penei Sewell, who is equally different from Taylor Decker, who is very different from Frank Ragnow. Like, and then you like, yeah, the defense is kind of on the same page, but then again, like Aiden's probably very different than Tracy Walker, but like, and so they found a way to take all these personalities and gel them together.
Yeah. But
these guys, like, no matter who you talk to on this team, they've always seemed to be going in the same direction. They all seem to be saying the same message, and the message that is trickling down from the top of the organization is making its way to the players, and the players understand it and are being able to just reinforce it to each other.
Yeah. I always go back to the Kelvin Shepherd stuff, right? Where he was talking about Dan Campbell and Kelvin Shepherd was talking about cutting his dreadlocks.
Yeah.
Like that to me, like I get chills thinking about Kelvin Shepherd telling that story of how Dan Campbell's like, no, don't be the Kelvin Shepherd that you think I want. Be Kelvin Shepherd. Be the Kelvin Shepherd you are. And you're right. Like that sort of stuff is absolutely trickling down. It was trickling down to have Jamal be his goofy, eccentric self and allow Taylor Decker to finally talk to the media without like this weight on his shoulders where he feels like he doesn't want to talk. I mean,
right.
It's so much better for us too as media when these players are allowed to like just speak their minds and no one is going to, turn around and hit their fingers with a ruler or anything like that once the media is out of the room. And yeah, like having that workplace environment that's just more relaxed. I mean, I'm sure you guys have done it too, right? Everyone that's watching this has been in a workplace where it's like you have to, you have to be on your tippy toes. You have to make sure you don't rock the boat. And then you've had awesome work environments where it's like everyone's just hanging out and being themselves and no one has to worry about things like that. And
right.
that impacts performance 100%.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely.
I mean, and we have to talk about, these are younger. I mean, a little bit over, but these are kids coming out. Right. Yeah. And so everything's changed. I mean, I don't want to talk about it. You can see it in the NCAA, right? With the, like this guy's getting paid. They're not going to, I mean, like it's all changing. They don't want to be coached. Right. So,
right.
And that was something I think we talked about last year in how Dan is going to connect with these younger and motivate them to want to run through the brick wall because, some people don't. So, and I think it's finding the right people. But anyway, let's keep it moving. I don't want to keep, right? Jeremy,
no, yeah, absolutely. Before we move on to the next topic, again, shout out to like our live audience that is watching us both on Twitch and YouTube. Please be sure to hit that follow button if you are new, or that subscribe button if you are on YouTube. Please also hit that like button. It really helps us a lot as we're trying to grow both of our platforms, both Twitch and YouTube. But yeah, no, getting back to some more off-season talk. So obviously John couldn't be here with us, but he did submit a couple questions that he wanted to kind of get out there. So this one is from him. So given that Holmes' free agency moves has allowed the Lions to go into the draft with no glaring needs, how likely is that we see some fireworks from Holmes, I guess, when it comes draft time?
It's possible. It's really possible, man. I don't know what to think of Brad Holmes at this point as a drafter, because we've really only seen him make aggressive moves up. They have, if I'm not mistaken, they've traded down once, but it wasn't. I think it was in the 6th round, right? He moved from the 6th to the 7th round and picked up an extra late round pick, I think. So,
Yes.
It's really interesting. I'm still very much team trade down and accumulate as much picks as you want. So I kind of like the position they're at right now, where they can get 4 top 50 guys or top 55 guys or whatever it is. Because again, like, you want to continue to build for the future. You want to make sure that this window stays open as long as possible. So the more assets that you trade to kind of accelerate that thing, the less you're going to have on the back end. So I'm kind of hoping he doesn't, but at the same time, like, it was pretty fun. It was pretty exciting last draft season
when he did,
when he made it up for Jameson, and we'll see how that one turns out. But yeah, I mean, there are so many avenues that they can go, which is exactly where you want to be as a team, right? You want to be in this position where you take the best player available, or you're addressing needs 3 or 4 years down the line rather than right now. And like, I think everything's on the board. I think quarterback is on the board. I think edge is on the board. I think corner is on the board. I hate to say it, but running back might be on the board at 18. Like,
what?
I do
Bijan?
Like, I'm not. You guys know I'm not in favor of that, but I'm not. But like, they just spent $6 million a year on a running back. I wouldn't have done that either. So
you heard it here first, folks.
Jeremy Reisman actually said the Lions could take a running back. Clip that, post it everywhere.
Could not should. That is a very important distinction. But no, I literally think everything's on the table here within reason. And so I don't know how to answer that. Yes, I guess there could be sparks on draft day. I just don't know. But again, that's an advantageous position to be in, because now no one around you knows what you're going to do.
The villain.
And that's like the thing, like, that hoodie is so much, like, hits so much harder now, because like, it's a villain in the sense of, like, he's been scheming. Like, it just feels like Brad Holmes has been scheming all season long. Like, these guys have no idea what I'm about to do in free agency.
Right.
And it's going to literally flip things upside down. And I mean, I've been tiptoeing this line for a while on, like, whether the Lions should or could make a big splash move, or even, I guess should make a big splash move, because you look at where this roster is and you're like, well, hell, they're already favored to win the North and therefore get into the playoffs. So like, part of me is like, well, then let's just see how far that takes you with what you currently have.
Right.
And then the little red devil on my shoulder pops up and is just like, but Lamar Jackson immediately kicks that window like clean open. Like, it goes from,
it melts the glass in the window.
It literally does. It literally goes from like, hey, you guys can win the division and maybe compete for the NFC, and it's like, nah, you get Lamar Jackson and you're absolutely like paving your way to the Super Bowl.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you a question here.
Okay.
Has the red devil shown up on your shoulder? And I've seen this happen with a couple Lions players saying, why don't we just go up and make sure we get Will Anderson?
So, see, no, not for that. Like,
okay.
Will Anderson,
yes for me, not for him.
Yeah, yes for Scotty, not for me,
I said because it last night.
Because I do think, well, one, that position is already so deep, right? And I don't see Will Anderson. Me personally, I don't see Will Anderson in the same way that I think other people do. Like, I know he's gotten like the Khalil Mack comparisons. But I guess I just don't view Will Anderson as like this generational, like, pass rusher that's, you're going to start him opposite Aiden, and that's 14 sacks. Like, he's going to put up like Nick Bosa, type numbers every year. Not saying that he can't. It's just not what I see right now. And when I look at, when I look at the landscape of the NFL right now, it still kind of is like, hey, the best quarterback typically gives your team the best chance to make it to the Super Bowl. And so right now, and again, this is nothing against Jared Goff. It's not like, oh, this is a vendetta against Jared Goff. It's literally because Lamar Jackson is available. If Lamar Jackson wasn't available, I wouldn't be saying this. But because he's available, it's like, so I could have arguably the second or third best quarterback in the NFC North, or in the NFC, or I could probably have like arguably top 5 quarterback in the NFL, period, and easily the best quarterback in the NFC if we were to get Lamar Jackson. And it's like, You're telling me that's going to cost me 2 first-round picks and obviously like giving up Jared Goff? Like, I have 2 of those right now, and yeah, I'll give up a future one for a Super Bowl. Like, yes, I will absolutely give that up to have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl.
Now, would that really be the definition of a villain?
Yes, because everybody would be like, "What the hell? I thought he loved Jared Goff." You just Mufasa'd Jared Goff.
Oh, no.
It would be Brad Holmes taking the role of Scar and literally digging his claws into Jared Goff's hands and whispering in his ears, "Long live the king," and then chucking him
off the cliff. No.
Who is Simba in that analogy? Who's the one that runs up to a thrown away Jared Goff?
Mark LeBay, who is a constant follower of ours on YouTube. He's the one that screams, "No." I don't know. Find your favorite like Jared Goff like fan. That's who that is. That is every Jared Goff like diehard fan that's just like, I can't believe you did that to him.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing, Meko.
I'm actually gonna pat myself on the back for that one.
That was entertaining. That was good. It was good.
Listen, I'm also not 100% against you. Like, and here's the thing. Like, I feel like I've seen some Lions fans kind of make a turn too. Now that like the majority of their immediate needs have been taken care of, a lot of people are like, maybe quarterback does kind of make some sense. And I've been trying to tell people forever, like, this is a bit of a fork in the road this year.
Yeah.
You have such a prime opportunity because of your draft capital to get a quarterback, whether it is Lamar Jackson or one of the top 3 or 4 guys in this year's draft class. Like, you can afford to be a little bit aggressive now. And you might have to, because next offseason you might be paying Jared Goff, and some people are perfectly fine with that and some people aren't. It's hard to know what camp you should be in with one not so good season for Jared Goff and one pretty darn good season with Jared Goff. And yes, the supporting cast has played a huge part into that, but Goff has had up and down seasons kind of regardless of his supporting cast in LA. So I think it's understandable for people to be on both sides of that argument.
And so again, like it's not something that like, it's something that like I'm coming to grips more and more where it's like, I want this. Like I'm starting to retweet stuff. I'm starting to post stuff in my story. Like, I do want this. I'm not going to like argue anybody down about it because it's not that serious. And at the end of the day, like, Brad Holmes has a much better plan than I do. But
your plan sounds fun though.
Say that again.
Your plan sounds fun though.
It does. And I think my biggest gripe was that like when this first came up, there were so many people like, "Oh, absolutely not. How could you think that's a good idea?" And it's like, right. Are we talking about the same Lamar Jackson here? Like, are we unanimous MVP before the age of 25? The guy who's never had like a consistent, well-rounded offensive line, that's never even had a wide receiver that's even capable of being a wide receiver 2 on most teams. Like, that's the Lamar Jackson we're talking about, right?
I think as someone who's a like incredibly risk-averse person, I feel like that's what it is. It's people are not willing to even consider a risky move because it's a risky move. It's a huge investment.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that has had some injuries and that's a whole different conversation that we don't need to get into. But the major argument is like, don't break something that isn't, or don't try to fix something that isn't broken, right? Like, this was a top 5 offense last year and Ben Johnson has got Jared Goff playing well, but I think there's always this like idea that you don't want to settle for good, right?
Yeah.
If you have an opportunity to be great.
Right. And
that's what this is, right? And so I get it. And I do think it's a little bit risky for my likings, but man, I'm not going to say if the Lions pulled this trade off tomorrow, I wouldn't be jumping up and down.
I was going to say, like, everybody would be running through the street. Like, everyone would be running down Woodward and just being like, we're going to the Super Bowl.
So that's where Meko got me, was with that. Is like, so we had this conversation, last week or the week before?
Yeah.
And he goes, so you're telling me, that's where he got me. Like, if we didn't pull this off, like, you wouldn't be pumped? I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, yeah, like, all right. Now, having said that, I want to hop into our next question, which dovetails on this pretty good. So since we don't have a backup QB right now, as you know, we're all well aware, does that mean, okay, so we don't have a backup QB. My original question was, does that mean anything with our draft? But, what do you think, Jeremy? I know it's the one you might be on both sides of the fence here. We just talked about it, but.
Well, here's what I say. I was convinced they were going to take a quarterback no matter what happened in this draft, and obviously I still very much feel that way.
Okay.
I don't know if it's going to be a developmental type that can be a potential starter. Hendon Hooker, I feel like has gained a lot of traction with Lions fans as of late. Maybe that's an option on day 2. There's been a lot of buzz that he might not even make it to day 2. Maybe
saw that today.
Yeah. A lot of people are kind of starting to be in that camp, and I don't know if that's the media catching up with the NFL or just kind of lying season, right?
Right. I'm always scared of that.
Right,
everybody's lying. Except
but
us here.
Yes. We are the harbingers of truth. But yeah, I mean, I think they have to add at least something, whether it is a guy they want to be a perennial backup or a guy that they want to, contend for a starting job. And they're still going to add someone in free agency. I think, it's hard to know. There's part of me that thinks Brad Holmes miscalculated here because he had that quote from the combine where he's like, yeah, a lot of free agent quarterbacks are going to wait until after the draft because they want to see what quarterback room they're going to be stepping into.
Yeah, I heard you say that, which makes a lot of sense now.
But now look at the backup quarterback market.
Right.
It's Teddy Bridgewater.
It's wrong.
And everybody.
Cam Newton, maybe? Like, I don't know.
Don't you get Scott started. Don't you get him started.
No, I'm off. I'm off that. I'm off that. We squashed that last year. Calm down. Take it easy.
Man.
Now, CBS is the problem, not me.
Yeah.
CBS saying that we're going to get Lamar or that Cam's the best fit for the Lions.
And I don't see where that came from. But no, I agree with you that I do. They have to address it somewhere. And again, I've been a big proponent of we just talked about. It's either for me, if you want to address the quarterback situation, it's either go swing for the fences and try to get Lamar and just and then you can literally, I don't care who you sign as the backup because I think Lamar will be the healthiest he's ever been playing here. But the other option is maybe you trade up to 3 and get a quarterback, or maybe one of these quarterbacks falls to you at 6 and you take that person. The one thing that I don't think I've gotten to talk about enough, because I think the conversation gets so heavily focused on Anthony Richardson or Will Levis or any of those guys at the top, is that there are some later there is one quarterback that I like later in the rounds, and that's Dorian Thompson-Robinson. You want to talk about a prospect that doesn't get nearly as much shine, but seems to have a lot of the same attributes that a lot of people like about Hendon Hooker, or that they really like about Anthony Richardson. He's mobile. He has a really good arm. He's had production. He has something that Anthony Richardson doesn't have. 5 years of experience as a starting quarterback. It's a guy that I'm sitting here where it's okay, if the Lions don't take one at the top of the draft, I'm fine. It doesn't have to be any of the top guys. It doesn't have to be Hendon Hooker. I've been zeroed in on Dorian Thompson-Robinson because I think that's the developmental quarterback that you would love to have, where he has already a very deep tool bag. You just need to refine a few things to make him, again, viable as a starter.
And I mean, that all that goes into again, the conversation that this is kind of the crossroads time for the Lions because they're in such a perfect situation to take on a guy like that where they can bench him for a year or two. They can give him the Jordan Love treatment, hopefully not to that degree,
right?
But they're in such a unique, good position to take on a quarterback that needs some time to incubate, to get their mind right, to get their NFL feet wet, all that sort of stuff. And so that's why it's why the people that are just completely against a quarterback that are unwilling to have that conversation. I don't understand what they're seeing why they're not seeing what I'm seeing, which is Lions have the draft capital. They have a unique situation where they have a starting quarterback that is capable of winning them games for the next at least 2 years. But the Lions have already said he's not going to be here forever. So we have to at least keep our eye on the quarterback. And listen, You can get better than Jared Goff. You can get a mobile quarterback that allows you to have a whole new dimension to your offense that the best offenses in the NFL almost all have. So why wouldn't you at least consider the option that, like, you're in a pretty good spot here, especially now. You don't need that top tier cornerback. You don't need that top tier edge defender. You're bringing back everybody from last year. You're in a good spot. Maybe, just maybe, let's think about getting a quarterback in here.
I love it. Like I said, it's
something
that.
Who would you take, Jeremy? Perfect
boy.
world. Perfect world. Perfect world. Where would you? What would you like to see?
All right, am I factoring? Am I just like picking my favorite quarterback in this class, or I'm picking like what it would like? Because I think CJ Stroud is going to be the best quarterback in this class. I do.
Okay.
And I hate to say it as a Wolverine, but I think he's going to be the best quarterback in this class. Do I want the Lions to trade up to 1 and get him? No, I don't.
Right.
If one of those guys is hanging around
this?
like 4 or 5, like if Stroud is there at 4, like I might be making a call.
If he's there at 3, I think he might have to make a call. Like,
right.
If Carolina goes goofy and takes Anthony Richardson, which again, I love his talent, but his ceiling, but like Anthony Richardson should not go 1.
Right.
And I think they would they will severely damage his career if they take him early like that.
But they could.
And so if he goes 1, I think Houston is smart enough. I'm giving DeMeco Ryans a lot of credit here, just from what he was able to do in San Francisco and coming from a healthy environment that he's going to just know better.
Right.
But they take Bryce Young and CJ Stroud is sitting there at 3. Like, I think you got to do everything in your power to be like, let's go get CJ Stroud. Because you're still in the same situation. You don't have to start him at all.
Right.
At all.
And it's interesting because I know there's been a couple like CJ Stroud, Jared Goff comparisons made, right? In terms of like how they are as quarterbacks. Specifically, I think like their reaction to pressure. You know, I think it's the one thing that they say about CJ Stroud. Well, you know what happened with Jared Goff in the second half of the season? He got a lot of better in those situations, right? He took a lot less sacks. He threw the ball away more. He just didn't turn the ball over at all. So they have a coaching staff that can coach that out of you. They can fix that issue with you. And CJ Stroud obviously brings a lot more talent to the table, I think, in terms of running ability, in terms of arm strength, in terms of all that sort of stuff. And so, like, I'm just looking at him like they can fix Jared Goff and some of his issues. Imagine what they can do with CJ Stroud. Give me that.
Yeah, that would be crazy. I mean, he's used to guys being wide open.
That too.
You know,
and Saints always open. I don't think what they do.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, we got a good crew. So, okay. Meko.
This next question is yours, right?
Yeah.
Or was this Gion's question?
No, this is mine. Did he get this? Did I send it too late?
Go ahead.
I'm off script now. I don't know what's coming.
No, it's not crazy. We're getting way too early to tell who might be your standout player this year with the Lions. Too early to tell who's just early. This is fun because we can revisit this.
Yeah.
And we can all say
draft,
one.
so
We'll all do it together.
I think this is coming more from my heart than my head here.
Okay.
And it's a guy that I think a lot of people circled last year as a guy who was supposed to break out and did in splashes, but I think this might be a big year for Aleem McNeil.
Okay.
Ooh. Because I think I think it's fair to say he's underwhelmed a little bit in his first 2 years, but he's going to be he's one of the guys, from my understanding, that really, that players only meeting, it really resonated with him. Like, he was one of the guys like, oh, I've been a little too lackadaisical here. Let me take things a little bit more seriously. And I think it wasn't long after that he had that monster game against the Giants.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great.
And so he's going to have another full offseason. He's going to understand the defense a little bit better. His supporting cast is going to be much better. And I hope that they add someone else on that defensive line in the draft to make it even better. I think we might have a breakout year for Aleem McNeil.
Nice. Good call.
That
well
is a good
done.
One.
The real journalism himself. It felt like a little bit of a Gian response too. Like, it caught us off guard, but like a great call. Like John.
No, that was actually like
That's funny.
Scotty, you want to go next or do you want me to go?
Yeah, I'll go. He's right here. He's right there.
That's a layup right there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I've been rooting for him since day one. I think he is so excited to play. I'm just containing him in his own energy. Like, I feel like he's gonna drop a bunch of balls just because he's so excited. So I just can't wait to see him. I think that I think it was, in a weird way, looking back, and we'll see what happens this year, as long as he does have a good season. Him being injured last year to get you just to kind of gently come into the team a little bit, that might have been a really good thing for him. Just in seeing him on social and learning about him, and like not kind of coming in and taking over in any sort of way, but like you're part of the team. I think that probably will help him in the long run. So to me, that's interesting to think that way. And I'm just excited to see him like just run so fast. Like, just like, bye. Like,
oh man,
I'm excited. So that's mine. Yeah.
So I had mine's picked, and then
Changed
Mark
it?
LeBay put in a name in the YouTube chat that like made me like second guess it a little.
LeBay.
But I think I'm
LeBay's back.
I think I'm gonna stick with mine's. I think I'm gonna stick with mine.
Okay.
And it's probably controversial, but I'm gonna say Jeff Okuda.
Ooh.
I think Jeff has.
Okay.
I kind of said this on Twitter earlier today, but I've been on this ilk where it's like I really don't think we're giving Jeff the proper, I don't know if the word's grace or credit or whatever the word is, but like to come off of an Achilles injury and play the way he did, not just at the beginning of the season, but remember, he did have to compete for that starting spot opposite of Monty. Like, it wasn't given to him. He did have to earn it. And granted, you may say that like, well, Will Harris isn't like great competition, or whoever he was competing against, but like, or Mike Hughes wasn't great competition, but he still had to earn it. And I feel like from what we were reading about training camp and OTAs, like Jeff was running away with it. It wasn't like even like a real competition, in the sense that like he took that personally, that he had to earn his spot. And I think going into this year, I was very much on board with like bringing in veteran corners, because I thought that's what Jeff needs at this point in his career. He needs guys that he can actually like lean on and give him advice and tell him how to approach the game and how to like encourage him to have a short-term memory, so that when things maybe go bad, he's quicker to bounce back. And he's not so in his head of like, I'm the number 3 overall pick, I have to do X, Y, and Z. And I also think, again, say what you will about, I mean, again, yes, we are all Michiganders. So like, or most of us are probably Michiganders. Say what you will about Ohio State. He is coming from a program where he's used to competing, and a program where they bring in 5-star guys at every level in most cases, and you have to earn it. You're not just given things just because you were a 5-star. So I think Jeff having Cam Sutton is going to be a great mentor to him. I think Emmanuel Mosley will be a great mentor to him, but I still expect Jeff to come out there and not concede anything to either of those guys just because they got paid, and just because he's on the last year of his deal, because I also don't expect Brad to pick up his 5th-year option.
Right.
I expect Jeff to attack this season with every bit of attitude of either you're going to re-sign me, or I'm going to make sure somebody else pays me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You made a couple really good, interesting points there. And I think one of your later points there is that Jeff Okuda hasn't really had a mentor type corner his entire career here, right? Like, I'm trying to think of any veteran good corners, I should say, that have walked through these doors. And really the only one is Aaron Glenn. And listen, I'm sure he's been a big mentor, but it's not quite the same, even as much of a player's coach as he is and former NFL player he is.
Wasn't Slay with us for like the first minute, or no? Was Slay gone?
No, Slay was traded before he got here.
Yeah,
before the draft, right?
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Aaron Glenn can't be with him, in the cafeteria and in the locker room, right? Like,
right, hanging out.
It's not the same. Like,
right.
you need, and so I think you're right. Cameron, he's a guy that could definitely benefit from the presence of Cameron Sutton. And then I'm trying to remember what your other really good point was, because you made a lot of them. But I think in general, he's got the X stacked against him. There's no doubt about it. He might he might not start a game this year. Like it's that
Mm-hmm.
he's got a tough hill to climb, but Emmanuel Mosley is a guy that might not be ready to go right away. I think he'll play in training camp, but everything we've learned from this regime is like with injuries, they're going to be very careful. They're going to take things slow. They're not going to push a guy into the starting lineup until they're very sure he's ready to go. I mean, Jerry Jacobs was a great example of that. He's a guy that I don't think the Lions wanted to wait on, but eventually did a little bit last year with the whole torn ACL of his own. And I think Jerry suffered his maybe a month or two later than Mosley did. But either way, going back to Okudah, the thing that I always wonder about is he took on that Achilles rehab so hard and so focused that part of me wonders if he just ran out of gas by the end of the year.
And that's been a similar thought process I had as well.
Right.
And Scott has had an Achilles tear, so he knows.
We've talked a ton about this. Yeah, I had a bad one from soccer, and with that, right? Excuse me. So you have these injuries. It takes so much to your point, Jeremy. It takes so much to get it back. Now, they have better athletic assistants than I did. However, I was in Denver and used the Denver Broncos facility and had some of the similar stuff. So when I did it, I did have access to what they use. So it was very quick healing, but it was extremely painful because if you think about it, they have to surgically repair it and sew it together. Yeah. So then your calf is immediately pulled. So you have to re-stretch and train that entire calf. And so what happens is that calf gets exhausted faster. And so when that happens, right, it goes up your leg to your hammy. And it also goes down like to below your Achilles and your bottom of your foot. Like, so it extends. So what happens is your Achilles is like strong as it ever can be. Like it will not re-break. That's why a lot of people tear the other one because you're putting more weight on the other one, right? Because the other muscles in your leg. So to me, the biggest issue with that, my experience, was the calf issue. And he's using that all the time. Right. And so to me, as you get through a season and just the weakness in the calf, you just cannot plant, you cannot jump, you cannot do what you need to do in his position. So yes, to your point of how he hit it so hard, yes, now they were watching him, but you can only control, he's going to go because when they say go, once it's repaired and you've kind of healed up the swelling, you can go, right? It's like just pain tolerance. And so, you get a partial tear in your calf. I mean, they're not going to say anything, but right, like it's just what happened there. I think I do agree, but I just giving a little bit of science behind that for why the fatigue, that whole side of his body, right, his hips and everything, he's got to have treatment on that every day. So, I mean, it won't exhaust him, but his muscles, his body's fatigued from that and from the pain tolerance, right? I mean, it's just one of those things. It nags, right, to this day, right? Like, so if he's in cold weather, that thing is stinging you. I don't care. Like, you loosen it up. It's heated up. No, like so to me, he dealt with a ton of stuff. And so to see what he did and for me to be through something like that, I mean, I give the guy like extreme props for how he worked through that and what he's doing. Because, I mean, it's a badass, dude, because and we're going to see it from Tracy Walker this year, right? I mean, somebody in the chat said, if we're talking defense, Tracy Walker could, I mean, he could have a great, but
Tracy was off to such a good start too.
Correct. Now with that though, I have the caveat of Tracy's going to have to deal with this.
100%.
Yeah.
But Okudah went through it. So Okudah can be like, yo, man, don't do this, do this. I mean, you have somebody that can then help you. Yo, what did this help? So it'll be interesting to see. And so that's my little caveat. But we talk about Achilles all the time because it's painful, it's horrifying, and it's happening a lot more because of the turf, because of the cleats they're they're trying to fix the turf, I know, right? I mean, you could speak to that more, I guess, but like that's the biggest thing, right? In soccer, you get the wrong cleat on the turf, something's got to give, and that will give. So anyway.
Yeah. And the only thing I want to add to that whole thing is, and I mentioned this on Twitter, talking with Meko on Twitter, this is the first normal offseason for Jeff Okudah. First one was the COVID season, so he didn't have any offseason workouts with the team. The second one, he was coming off core surgery, I think on both sides. And then obviously the Achilles last offseason. So now he's a normal football player again, really for the first time in the NFL. And so he'll be in all those offseason workouts. He'll be in training camp and hit the ground running. he's got a lot of competition now, and I'm never going to mentally count out Jeff Okudah because that dude is going to scrap until someone drags him off the field.
Right.
I was gonna say, like, when you're talking about mentally tough, I mean, I think Jeff has demonstrated that just as much as any other player on that defense. I mean, the only difference is that Jeff is quiet, right? I think, and that's what gets misconstrued, is that, like, well, he's so quiet, so maybe this is getting to him. And it's like, no, Jeff just, when you see him speak, you can tell that he just locks in. Like, he doesn't have to.
It's intense, man. Talking to that guy, like, he just has this focus about him where it's just like, are you thinking about ripping my head off right now? What is going through your head right now?
Wanted to give a shout out to so we have a heavyweight in our YouTube chat. So shout out to Easy from Woodward.
What up, E?
What's up, man?
He kind of pointed out, like, I guess, and again, with us talking about a mentor to Jeff Okudah, he was like a Rasheed Mathis to his Slay.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
And they talk, like, those guys still talk about how important that young group of corners mixed in with, like, a Rasheed Mathis. Like, I know, gosh, who was it? Someone recently mentioned him as well. It might have been Glover Quinn, or I mean, Glover Quinn in that room to obviously Quandre Diggs as well, all that sort of stuff. Like, that stuff really, really matters. And I hope Cam Sutton can be that guy. And everything I've heard about Cam Sutton sounds like he has those qualities that could be that to Jeff Okudah, that could be that to Jerry Jacobs. I mean, could be that to a cornerback if they still draft a cornerback, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think, I think you have the combination of Cam Sutton, and you have the combination of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who, again, he echoed very similar remarks about his time in New Orleans, about how important it was to have those veterans to instill in him at a young age. So, or young in his career, not at a young age, but young in his career. So, Jeremy, we're gonna get you out of here in a second, but I mean, we have one final question. John wanted to, I guess, kind of keep it a little light. When it comes to pizza, yes
not
to
Olive
ranch
Garden
dressing, no to ranch dressing, or only for the crust?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I'm pretty anti-ranch dressing in general, and I know that might get my Midwestern card pulled, but to me, like, ranch is just, you put that on something you don't like because you want to just eat ranch.
That's fair.
Ranch is just like it's such a strong flavor. So that's why people dunk vegetables in it, because vegetables are gross. So you dunk that in ranch. Pizza is already amazing. What are you doing?
I don't know. He's from California. It's a different thing out there. You know, he's in California. I think he's been converted. He's, you know.
That was a great answer. Great answer.
No, it's the only correct answer. So first of all, because ranch on pizza is absolutely disgusting. I'm 100% with Jeremy. Pizza is amazing the way it is. What are you doing? It should only be like, I will give you a pass on ranch with wings if it's like spicy wings, and it's literally just to help handle the heat.
Right.
What about ranch with breadsticks, cheese sticks? That's where I go. I can do that. That's a dip.
We're getting dangerously close to mozzarella sticks territory here. I'd still prefer
ranch
marinara.
With mozzarella sticks isn't terrible. Like, marinara is better. Marinara is way better.
Yeah,
but you can pass with ranch.
Yeah.
Well, Jeremy, we appreciate you coming by. Again, we appreciate everything that you guys have been able to do for us as a podcast, as an apparel company. Yeah. So again, we really do appreciate you taking out time to just take out time of your schedule and come by, answer some of our questions, engage with us, engage with our audience. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. And I appreciate what you guys do. I think you guys create some actual, like, awesome content. You guys obviously know your stuff. You're not just like random guys in front of a microphone. You guys care. You guys know what you're doing. And listen, like, Pride of Detroit has always been about community. And so I want to give back to that community in any ways that we can. And with this business, like, I know there's so many people that want to be content creators with Lions football or sports talk. And I think there's plenty of room for that. There's so many damn platforms that you can, you know, jump off of, that anything I can do, I don't view it as competition. I view it as, I mean, to throw it back to our good friend Jamal, it's all about positive competition, right? It's all about getting us to be better and helping out each other while also, you know, working towards a common goal here. So You guys have been long supporters of us. I appreciate the subscriptions on Twitch, or even, just the interactions on Twitter and that sort of stuff. I like having those conversations. I can't pull myself away from Twitter even when I'm on vacation in Florida, because I enjoy talking with you guys so much about this sort of stuff. So it really feels like I'm indebted to you guys more so than vice versa with things like this. So
well, then you're just a lucky guy, because this is the new questionable gear. It's coming your way to the whole team.
Oh boy.
So
nice.
We got the whole.
That's awesome.
Lions
I have to say,
label, all the sayings on the back too. Oh, he's
wearing your apparel right now with the Jamal Williams hoodie, because I can't let go.
That's that's okay.
The swag daddy here.
We've had actually a bunch of orders for that recently.
People, really?
I know, it's gonna hurt. It's going to hurt so bad when we have to take that off the website.
Might leave it for a while.
Hurt.
The one thing I'll say though is, like, I'm a sloppy eater, so I have to make sure the sweatshirt's off when I'm eating, because
I'll make you another one. I got you. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
We will always have the artwork. So if something ever happens to it, just DM us.
Yeah,
and be
I
like,
made
hey,
that.
I need a new one.
Right.
We're good. But a little bit about this design before you go. It's all the sayings for the Lions. Like, we got I don't know if you can you see?
Yeah.
So let the big dog eat, grit all the time. F the Packers. Welcome to Detroit. Brand new Lions. Obviously we made this before Jamal left, but there's even his quote from, I think, the Packers game
with the dog,
where
100% dog.
Tears for you. It's 100% dog around here.
It's still 100% dog, but we might have
Jamal here is here or not. It's still that. So
it
is. Jeremy, you and the guys will be the first ones to get that. The rest of our audience, please be patient. We will be having that on the website. You'll be able to get it as a hoodie. You'll be able to get it as a t-shirt. It'll be available in the colors that Scotty and I are wearing. So you'll have the white with the Honolulu blue,
and a blue with a white,
black. Yeah, blue with white, black and white. So again, stay tuned. We have so many great ideas.
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff coming.
MCDC tour shirt. Second tour shirt
2023.
So
it's gonna be fun. So and we'll talk to Jeremy. Maybe we'll launch it with you guys. Maybe we'll come on and launch, and we'll do a 48-hour sale.
I'm in
to start it.
Let's do it.
That could be fun.
Yeah, I'm in.
No, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well,
yeah.
That's it. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you on YouTube, on Twitch. Please hit that follow, hit that subscribe. Thank you again for everybody in the chat. Great chat today. We had a lot of people in, a lot of good questions. Jeremy, thank you so much for stopping by and sharing so much of your time. We are obviously huge fans of yours and the team. We love what you do. We live by what you do in digesting your content. So thank you for everything you do. So I think it's pretty even right now. So, but we appreciate all the kind words. We appreciate the raid yesterday. We appreciate your honesty and the answers. And just again, want to thank the crew, want to thank the fam. Meko, want to thank you. And Meko.
Real quick. Also, guys, if you are not following Jeremy, if you guys are not following Pride of Detroit, first of all, get yourself together. How dare you call yourself a Lions fan and not be doing those things? Jeremy, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, all of the Pride of Detroit stuff at Pride of Detroit. Twitch is where we do our main live show. So make sure you go to twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit if you want to catch our live shows. And then if you want to see me ramble on about Lions football and other dumb stuff, Detroit on Lion on Twitter.
Love that. Well, and then
if you guys are not following Jeremy, or if you're not following Pride of Detroit, do both of those things. Their Twitch streams are amazing. It's always a good time in there. So
and you guys are on tomorrow, right? As well.
Yeah, we'll be on Wednesday afternoon, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Me and Eric Schlitt answer questions live on our Twitch channel.
Nice.
Perfect. But so again, shout out to my wife, shout out to my family. Again, Jeremy, thank you so much for making the time for us. And yeah, man, that's pretty much it for me, Scotty.
That's it. Jeremy, anything else to close us out?
Oh, you're gonna put it on me to close out your show?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Go get Lamar Jackson. There you go.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And that is the Questionable Podcast. Out.